The emergency lights blazed red across the Imperial Medical Center's top floor. Inside the royal suite, Crown Prince Kale had been crying for 72 hours straight. Not the normal fussing of a newborn, this was different. This was a wail that seemed to pierce through walls, a sound of pure distress that no one could soothe. Emperor Vashran stood by the window, his massive frame casting shadows across the polished floor. His scales, usually gleaming platinum, looked dull under the harsh lights. He hadn't slept in 3 days. None of them had. Empress Talira sat beside their son's medical pod, her elegant fingers hovering over the crying infant but not quite touching him. Every time she tried to hold him, his cries grew worse. The helplessness in her ancient eyes was something her attendants had never seen before. Valdorian royalty didn't show weakness. They didn't break. But right now she looked ready to shatter. "Bring in the Mindari healer," the Emperor said, his voice rough. "I don't care what it costs." The physician in charge, a reptilian named Vexith, clicked his tongue in frustration. "Your Majesty, we've already consulted with 17 specialists. The Mindari are our last option, and honestly, I doubt." "Just do it," Talira interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. They tried everything. Crystalline healers who could manipulate energy fields. Physicians who'd studied for 2 centuries. Even a telepath who claimed to read infant minds. Nothing worked. The prince just kept crying, his tiny face red, his little fists clenched tight. Meanwhile, 4 floors below, Tom Morrison was having a much simpler night. He pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor, humming quietly to himself. The night shift suited him just fine. No crowds. No judgmental stares from the aliens who considered humans barely better than pets. Just him, his mop, and the peaceful silence of an empty building. Tom had been working at the Imperial Medical Center for 2 years now. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. Better than the construction jobs back on Earth, where he'd spent 20 years breaking his back for bosses who didn't know his name. Here at least the work was clean. Simple. He knew what was expected of him. He pulled out his old music player, ancient technology by galactic standards, but it still worked, and put in one earbud. The other ear stayed free. Safety regulations. He'd learned that the hard way after nearly getting run over by a medical transport cart. The song playing was one his grandmother used to sing. He couldn't remember where she'd learned it, probably from her mother who'd learned it from hers. That's how these things worked with humans. They passed down songs like some species passed down genetic memories. Tom started humming along. "Hush little baby, don't say a word." His grandmother had raised him after his parents died. Car accident when he was 6. She didn't have much. A small house in Ohio, a pension that barely covered groceries, hands that were always rough from work. But she had songs. Hundreds of them. And on the nights when young Tom couldn't sleep, missing his mom and dad, she'd sit by his bed and sing until the hurt felt a little less sharp. He was thinking about her now as he mopped. She'd been gone 10 years, but sometimes he still caught himself reaching for the phone to call her. The corridor was quiet except for his humming and the soft squeak of his mop. Tom worked his way toward the royal wing, which was usually off-limits. But tonight they'd called in extra security, and the regular cleaning staff was stretched thin. Someone had to mop these floors even if they were near the royal suite. He didn't know what was happening up there. Didn't really care if he was honest. Royal problems weren't his problems. He had enough of his own. Rent was due next week, his apartment's heater was broken, and his cat had been acting weird lately. Probably just hairballs, but still. Tom pushed his cart past a set of massive doors. Some kind of important room, he figured. Maybe where they kept expensive equipment. He kept humming, lost in memories of Ohio and his grandmother's kitchen and the smell of her terrible coffee. He didn't notice when the crying stopped. But 4 floors up, every medical monitor in the royal suite went crazy. Prince Kale went silent mid-wail. His mouth closed. His tiny chest stopped heaving. For one terrifying moment, everyone thought he'd stopped breathing. Then they saw his eyes. Wide open. Alert. Staring at the door like he was trying to see through it. Empress Talira shot to her feet. What just happened? Dr. Vexith checked the monitors frantically. His vitals are normal. Better than normal. His stress hormones just dropped to nothing. Why? The Emperor demanded. Nobody had an answer. Then Tom's cart squeaked farther away down the hall, and the humming faded with it. Prince Kale's face crumpled. The crying started again just as intense as before. The Empress's eyes went wide. That sound. Did you hear that sound? What sound? Vexith asked. In the hallway. Someone was making music? Something. She rushed to the door, yanked it open, and looked down the empty corridor. Far in the distance, she could just barely see a figure pushing a cleaning cart. "Get them," she said. "Right now." 2 security guards took off running. Their armored boots thundered against the floor as they chased down the distant janitor. Tom heard them coming and his heart nearly stopped. His first thought was that he'd broken some rule he didn't know about. His second thought was that they were going to deport him. He'd heard stories about humans getting kicked off stations for minor violations. The guards caught up to him in seconds. They were HFY warriors, 8 feet tall, covered in black armor, with faces that looked like they'd been carved from stone. "You need to come with us," one of them said. Tom's mouth went dry. What did I do?" "No questions. Come now." They didn't give him a choice. Each guard took one of his arms and lifted him clear off the ground. Tom's legs dangled uselessly as they carried him back down the corridor at a jog. His cleaning cart sat abandoned, mop still in the bucket. This was it. He was getting fired. Maybe arrested. He wondered if he'd have time to call someone about his cat. They brought him to the massive doors he'd walked past minutes ago. The guards didn't even slow down. The doors slid open automatically, and suddenly Tom was inside the most luxurious room he'd ever seen. Everything gleamed. The walls looked like they were made of crystal and light. Equipment floated in midair, displaying information in languages Tom couldn't read. And there were people, beings, everywhere. At least 20 different species, all wearing the kind of clothes that cost more than Tom made in a year. They all turned to stare at him. Tom wanted to disappear. Then he saw the Empress. Even if someone hadn't told him who she was, he would have known. She had the kind of presence that made you want to bow without being told. 10 feet tall, covered in platinum scales that caught the light like mirrors, with eyes that looked older than mountains. She walked toward him and Tom forgot how to breathe. "You were humming something," she said. Her voice was soft but carried weight. "In the corridor." "What was it?" Tom's brain struggled to process the question. Just a song. An old song from Earth." "Sing it again," the Emperor said from behind her. He was even bigger than his wife, with a voice that rumbled like thunder. I can't really sing. I was just." "Please." The Empress's voice cracked slightly. "Our son. He stopped crying when you passed. We need to know why." Tom looked past her and saw the medical pod. Inside was the smallest baby he'd ever seen, purple-skinned with large eyes, crying hard enough that his whole body shook with it. Something in Tom's chest twisted. He'd never had kids of his own, but he recognized that look on the royal couple's faces. He'd seen it in the mirror plenty of times when he was young and missing his parents. That look of wanting to fix something and having no idea how. "Okay," Tom said quietly. "I'll try." He cleared his throat and started humming. "Hush little baby, don't say a word." Prince Kale stopped crying. Just like that. 1 second he was wailing, the next he was quiet, eyes wide, little hands reaching toward Tom. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Dr. Vexith started scanning Tom with some kind of device, muttering to himself. Other physicians crowded closer, trying to understand what they were seeing. Tom kept humming, feeling more awkward by the second. Every important person in the room was staring at him like he just performed magic. When he stopped to take a breath, the prince started fussing again. When he resumed, the baby calmed. The pattern was undeniable. Empress Talira looked at Tom with an expression he couldn't quite read. Relief maybe. Or disbelief. Or both. "What's your name?" she asked. "Tom Morrison, Your Majesty. I work in maintenance. Janitorial services." "Not anymore," she said firmly. "You'll stay here. With us. With our son." Tom's mind went blank. "I'm sorry, what?" "Our son needs you," the Emperor said. It wasn't a request. Tom thought about his apartment. His cat. His simple, quiet life where nobody expected anything from him except clean floors. Then he looked at the tiny prince, who was staring at him with such focus it was almost funny. And he looked at the desperate parents who'd probably move stars if it meant helping their child. "I'll stay," Tom said. "But someone's gonna need to feed my cat." Tom's first full day in the royal wing felt like living in a dream he couldn't wake up from. They'd given him a room 3 times the size of his apartment back on Earth. The bed was so comfortable it made him nervous. He kept thinking he'd break something just by existing in a space this nice. A young Valdorian attendant named Lyra showed him around. She was polite but clearly confused about why a human janitor was suddenly living in the royal quarters. Tom didn't blame her. He was pretty confused about it too. "The washroom is through here," Lyra explained, gesturing to a door that slid open automatically. And your meals will be brought at standard intervals unless you request otherwise. Tom nodded, trying to remember everything. And the prince? Just down the hall. You'll be called whenever he needs you. She paused, her scales shifting color slightly, some kind of emotion Tom hadn't learned to read yet. The physicians want to establish a schedule. They're discussing it now. That schedule turned out to be exhausting. Prince Kale didn't sleep like human babies. He'd be awake for hours, then sleep for 30 minutes, then awake again. And every time those violet eyes opened, he'd start fussing until Tom showed up humming. By the third day, Tom's throat was raw. He'd gone through every lullaby his grandmother taught him twice over. Rockabye Baby. Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. You Are My Sunshine. Songs he hadn't thought about in years came back like muscle memory. Dr. Vexith hated every minute of it. The reptilian physician made his disapproval clear during every examination. He'd scan Tom with various devices, his tail twitching with irritation when the results showed nothing unusual. There's no scientific basis for this, Vexith muttered, studying his datapad. Your vocal patterns are unremarkable. Your genetic structure is standard for your species. Yet somehow. Sometimes things just work without a reason, Tom offered. Vexith's eyes narrowed. Everything has a reason. We simply haven't found it yet. But not everyone shared Vexith's hostility. Dr. Shinera, one of the crystalline healers, approached the situation differently. Her body refracted light into rainbow patterns as she moved, and her voice had a musical quality that Tom found soothing. I've been analyzing the recordings of your humming, she said one afternoon, pulling up holographic displays. Comparing them to Valdorian lullabies. The frequency patterns are actually quite similar. But there's something else. Something I can't measure. What do you mean? Tom asked. Shinara's crystalline form seemed to pulse thoughtfully. When you hum, there are micro-variations in tone and rhythm. They're not random, they follow an emotional pattern. Like you're feeling something while you sing, and that feeling changes the sound in ways our instruments can't quite capture. Tom thought about that. My grandmother used to say you can't just sing the words. You gotta mean them. Exactly. Shinara brightened. But most species don't work that way anymore. We've optimized our communication. Made it precise and efficient. Perhaps we've lost something in the process. The Empress had been thinking along the same lines. She started spending more time with Tom, asking him to teach her the lullabies. They'd sit in a small garden within the royal wing, Prince Kale between them, while Tom tried to explain songs that felt too simple to need explanation. It's just, hush little baby, don't say a word, Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird, Tom sang softly. Then you keep going with different things. A diamond ring, a looking glass, whatever. The Empress tried to mimic the melody. Her voice was beautiful, far better than Tom's rough humming, but when she sang to Kale, he didn't respond the same way. He'd calm down a bit, but he wouldn't get that peaceful, focused look he got with Tom. I don't understand, Talira said, frustration creeping into her voice. I'm singing the correct notes. The rhythm is precise. Maybe too precise, Tom said carefully. He didn't want to offend an empress, but she'd asked for honesty. When my grandma sang, she'd mess up the words sometimes. Go off key. But it didn't matter because I could feel that she cared. That she was singing because she wanted me to feel safe. Talira was quiet for a long moment. We don't really do that. Valdorians, I mean. We don't show weakness or uncertainty. It's considered inappropriate, especially for royalty. It's not weakness, Tom said. It's just being real with somebody. The conversation stayed with Tom that night. He couldn't sleep, still adjusting to the too soft bed and the strange sounds of the palace at night. He kept thinking about his grandmother, about how she'd raised him on almost nothing. No fancy technology. No team of experts. Just her and her songs and her rough hands that always felt warm. Around midnight, his communicator buzzed. Prince Kale was awake and crying. Tom dragged himself out of bed and shuffled down the hall in the pajamas they'd given him. Silk, which felt ridiculous. The royal suite was dimly lit for night mode. Empress Talira sat by her son's pod, looking exhausted. I'm sorry, she said when she saw Tom. I tried singing to him. It didn't work. It's okay. Tom approached the pod and started humming, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Kale calmed almost immediately, his little hands grasping at the air. Talira watched them both. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why do you still think of yourself as just a janitor? You're clearly more than that now. Tom kept humming for a moment before answering. Because that's what I am. I clean floors. I'm good at it. This thing with your son, it's not because I'm special. It's just because I know some old songs. But those songs matter. They're saving my son's life. Yeah, but they're not my songs. They're my grandmother's. And her grandmother's. And probably 100 grandmothers before that. I'm just the guy who remembered them. Tom looked at the tiny prince. Besides, the second I start thinking I'm important, that's when I'll mess this up. Better to remember I'm just Tom from Ohio who got lucky. The Empress smiled, the first real smile Tom had seen from her. Your grandmother taught you humility along with those songs. She taught me a lot of things. Didn't appreciate most of them until after she was gone. Over the next few weeks, word spread through the palace about the humans' methods. Other Valdorian families started requesting Tom's help. Parents who'd been struggling with fussy infants, following every protocol perfectly but still feeling like something was missing. Tom was overwhelmed. He wasn't a teacher. He wasn't a childcare expert. He was just a guy who knew some songs. But the desperate parents didn't care about his qualifications. So Tom started holding small gatherings in one of the palace gardens. 20 or 30 Valdorian parents would show up, these tall, impressive beings with their scales and their centuries of wisdom, sitting cross-legged on the grass while a middle-aged human taught them Rock-a-Bye Baby. It was absurd. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Some parents got it right away. Others struggled, their voices technically perfect but emotionally flat. Tom noticed that the ones who succeeded weren't necessarily the best singers. They were the ones who stopped trying to perform and started trying to connect. There was one father, a palace guard named Rivik, whose daughter couldn't sleep. He tried everything the physicians recommended. When he came to Tom's session, he looked like he hadn't slept in a month. Tom taught him Hush Little Baby, and Rivik's first attempts were mechanical. Correct but cold. Tell me about your daughter, Tom said. What's she like? Rivik's expression softened. She's perfect. Curious about everything. Yesterday she grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go for an hour. I just sat there, didn't want to move because she looked so peaceful. Think about that when you sing, Tom said. Think about how it felt holding her little hand. Rivik tried again. This time his voice was rougher, less polished, but something changed in the melody. That night, his daughter slept for 4 straight hours, the longest stretch since she was born. The success stories piled up. Parents who'd been following scientific protocols perfectly started adding something less measurable. Emotion. Presence. The willingness to be imperfect if it meant being real. Dr. Shinera documented everything, publishing papers that made waves in academic circles. Other physicians called her research unscientific, accused her of mysticism. But she stood firm. Just because something couldn't be measured didn't mean it wasn't real. Tom tried to stay out of the politics. He just kept showing up, teaching songs and reminding parents that kids didn't need perfection. They needed someone who cared enough to keep trying. Late one night, Emperor Vashran found Tom in the garden, humming to himself while looking at the stars. Earth wasn't visible from here, wrong part of the galaxy, but Tom liked to imagine he could see it anyway. You're changing how my people raise their children, the Emperor said quietly. Tom shrugged. I'm just sharing some songs, Your Majesty. It's more than songs. You're teaching us something we forgot. The Emperor sat down on the grass beside him, which was so unexpected Tom nearly fell over. For generations we've optimized everything. Made parenthood into a science. But we lost the art of it. Science is good, Tom said. Your doctor saved my life when I had that infection last week. Science matters. But it's not everything. No, Tom agreed. It's not everything. They sat in comfortable silence, watching alien constellations Tom didn't have names for. Somewhere in the palace, Prince Kale was sleeping soundly. And across the city, Valdorian parents were singing imperfect lullabies to their children, trying to mean the words instead of just saying them. Tom thought his grandmother would have liked that. It's about connection. Being willing to be imperfect and vulnerable if it means truly reaching someone. She looked at her son. I've spent my whole life being strong and controlled. Never showing weakness. But that's not what he needs from me. He needs you to be his mom, Tom said. Not an empress. Just, his mom. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the palace. Parents stopped obsessing over perfect developmental protocols and started focusing on emotional connection. The change was subtle but real. Kids seemed happier. Parents seemed less stressed. The medical staff noticed too. Childhood illness rates dropped slightly, not dramatically but measurably. Dr. Shinera theorized that emotional security boosted immune function, though she couldn't prove it definitively. Meanwhile, Tom trained other staff members in his methods. Lyra, the young attendant, finally got it after weeks of trying. She'd been singing perfectly but feeling nothing. Then one day she told Tom about her own childhood, about the aunt who'd raised her after her parents died. She used to hum this one melody, Lyra said. I can't remember the words, but the tune made me feel safe. Hum it, Tom said. She did, and her voice carried genuine emotion for the first time. When she tried it with a fussy infant in the palace nursery, the baby calmed immediately. Lyra cried with relief. I thought I'd never figure it out. You were trying too hard, Tom told her. Sometimes you gotta stop thinking and just feel. Word spread beyond the palace. Other Valdorian cities started requesting information about the human method. Some embraced it enthusiastically. Others rejected it as primitive emotional manipulation. Tom found the whole thing overwhelming. He just shared some old songs. He hadn't meant to start a cultural movement. One evening he sat in the garden with Prince Kale, now 4 months old and much stronger. The baby was awake and curious, watching the alien sunset with wide eyes. Your mom's getting pretty good at this, Tom told him, humming softly. Pretty soon she won't need me at all. The thought made him both relieved and sad. He'd never planned to stay on Valdoria forever. Earth called to him sometimes, especially on quiet nights. He missed real coffee and baseball and the way fall smelled back in Ohio. But looking at Kale's peaceful face, Tom realized he'd missed this too. Missed this little kid who'd somehow changed everything just by crying at the right moment. You're gonna be okay, Tom whispered. You got good parents who love you. That's more than a lot of kids get. Emperor Vashran found him there an hour later, still humming, with Kale asleep in his arms. Thank you, the Emperor said simply. For what? For reminding us how to be people instead of just Valdorians. Tom smiled. That's all any of us are trying to figure out, Your Majesty. How to be good to each other. The trouble started with a message from the Confederation of Advanced Species. Ambassador Crethon arrived on a Tuesday, his energy form contained in a sleek crystalline suit that made him look like a walking diamond. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from representing the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Tom was in the garden with Prince Kale when the ambassador arrived. He didn't know anything was wrong until Lyra came running, her scales flashing anxious yellow. Tom, you need to come. There's a council meeting. About you. About me? Why? Just come. Please. The Grand Council chamber was intimidating as hell. High ceilings that seemed to stretch forever. Seats arranged in a circle, each one occupied by important-looking beings from different species. And at the center, a holographic display showing Tom's face. He felt his stomach drop. Ambassador Crethon stood at the presentation platform, his energy form pulsing with authority. The matter before us is simple, he announced. The Crown Prince of the Valdorian Empire is being raised using primitive methods introduced by a human, a species barely out of its own solar system. This sets a dangerous precedent. Emperor Vashran sat in the largest seat, his expression unreadable. Empress Talira beside him looked tense. Tom was directed to a small chair off to the side, feeling completely out of place in his simple clothes among all this grandeur. The human has helped our son, Vashran said carefully. We see no issue with. Of course you don't see the issue, Crethon interrupted, his voice sharp. You're too close to it. But the rest of the galaxy is watching. They see the mighty Valdorian Empire abandoning advanced medical science for folk songs. They see weakness. Dr. Vexith stood up from his seat. Tom's heart sank. He knew what was coming. I have to agree with the ambassador, Vexith said, pulling up data on the holographic display. I've conducted extensive analysis of the prince's development. While he's healthy, we have no way to know if he'd be even healthier with proper protocols. The human's methods are entirely unscientific. Based on feeling rather than fact. Crethon nodded approvingly. Exactly. And now these methods are spreading. Parents across Valdoria are abandoning proven techniques for this emotional approach. We're seeing similar trends on 3 other worlds. This is cultural contamination on a massive scale. Tom wanted to sink into his chair and disappear. He'd never asked for any of this. He just hummed some songs to a crying baby. The Confederation proposes a solution, Crethon continued. Remove the human from the royal household. Implement our advanced developmental protocols instead. They've been refined over millennia and produce measurably superior results in intelligence, physical development, and social integration. Superior by what measure? Dr. Shannara's voice cut through the chamber. She stood, her crystalline body refracting the light into rainbow patterns. Intelligence scores? Physical benchmarks? What about happiness? What about the ability to form emotional bonds? Those qualities are subjective and therefore irrelevant, Crethon replied dismissively. Are they? Shannara pulled up her own data. I've been tracking the children raised with Tom's methods for 3 months now. Yes, their developmental scores are slightly lower in some technical areas. But their stress hormone levels are significantly reduced. They form stronger attachments to caregivers. They show more curiosity and less anxiety. Vexith scoffed. Lower developmental scores prove my point. We're literally making our children less intelligent for the sake of feelings. Or maybe, Shannara countered, we're making them more complete. Intelligence without emotional health is just processing power. These children aren't robots. They're people. The chamber erupted in argument. Different species shouting in different languages, some supporting Shannara, others backing Vexith and Crethon. Tom sat frozen, watching his simple act of humming get dissected and debated like it was some kind of weapon. Empress Talira finally stood and the room went quiet. She had that effect on people. Ambassador Crethon, you speak of measurable results. Let me give you one. My son was dying. Your advanced species sent their best physicians. They all failed. This human succeeded. That's measurable. Correlation isn't causation, Crethon replied smoothly. The prince may have simply needed time. The human's presence could be entirely coincidental. 3 days, Talira said, her voice cold. My son cried for 3 days while your experts tried everything. Tom walked past humming and Kale stopped crying instantly. That's not coincidence. That's cause and effect. Emotional thinking, Crethon said. The Confederation expected better from Valdorian royalty. That was a mistake. Vashran stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. You will not question my wife's judgment in my own council chamber. The room went very quiet. We appreciate the Confederation's concern, Vashran continued, his voice dangerous. But this is a Valdorian matter. We will decide how to raise our son. Crethon's energy form pulsed with irritation. Very well. But know that the Confederation is watching. This rejection of scientific progress will be noted. There may be consequences for your standing among advanced civilizations. It was a threat thinly veiled. Tom felt sick. He'd somehow become a political problem. An embarrassment. Maybe even a danger to the Empire's relationships with powerful allies. The vote came down to a narrow margin. Tom could stay but with conditions. Regular developmental assessments of the prince. Monitoring of other children raised with his methods. And if any negative effects appeared, he'd be removed immediately and the whole program shut down. After the meeting, Tom went straight to his room. He sat on the edge of that too comfortable bed and put his head in his hands. There was a knock on the door. Lyra peeked in. Tom? Are you okay? I'm making things worse, he said. For the Empire. For the Emperor and Empress. They're risking their relationships with powerful species because of me. You're helping children. That's not making things worse. Tell that to the Confederation. Tom looked up at her. Maybe I should just go. Head back to Earth. Find another janitor job somewhere quiet. The prince needs you. He needs his parents. And they're getting good at this. Talira's been singing to him every day. He responds to her now. But I never should have stayed this long. Tom stood up, started looking around for his few possessions. I'm a janitor, Lyra. Not a childcare expert. Not a cultural revolutionary. Just a guy who knows some old songs. This whole thing got way out of control. Before Lyra could respond, Empress Talira entered without knocking. She looked tired but determined. Don't, she said simply. Your Majesty, don't run away because things got difficult. That's not who you are. Tom laughed bitterly. You don't know who I am. I've been running away from difficult things my whole life. That's why I left Earth. That's why I took a janitor job on an alien station where nobody knew me. Running away is basically my specialty. Talira moved closer. My son is thriving because of you. Not just surviving, thriving. He's curious and engaged and happy. Those things matter more than test scores or political alliances. Even if it costs you allies? Even then. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Through the window he could see the alien sunset painting the sky in colors Earth never had. He thought about his grandmother, who never ran from anything in her life even when she probably should have. I don't want to cause you problems, he said finally. Too late. You already have. Talira smiled slightly. But they're the good kind of problems. The kind that make us question whether we've been doing things right. Those are problems worth having. That night Tom couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the council meeting, about Crethon's cold dismissal of emotional health, about Vexith's data proving the prince's development was slightly behind optimal benchmarks. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was holding Kale back. Maybe all those parents who'd adopted his methods were accidentally hurting their kids by prioritizing feelings over measurable results. Around midnight he got up and walked to the garden. He needed air and space to think. He found Emperor Vacheron already there, sitting alone under the stars. "Can't sleep either?" the Emperor asked. "Too much going on in my head." Tom sat down on the grass nearby. "Your Majesty, I have to ask. Are you sure about this? Because I can leave. I can go back to Earth and you can tell the Confederation you came to your senses. Things can go back to normal." Vacheron was quiet for a while. "When Kale was born I felt nothing. No joy, no love. Just responsibility. I looked at my son and saw an heir, a political necessity, a continuation of the bloodline. That's how I was raised. That's how Valdorian royalty has operated for centuries." He turned to look at Tom. "Then you showed up with your ridiculous songs and your emotional approach and your insistence that feelings matter. And slowly I started to actually feel something for my son. Not duty. Well, real, messy, inconvenient love." Tom didn't know what to say. "So no," Vacheron continued, "I'm not sure this is politically wise. I'm not sure it's scientifically optimal. But I'm sure I want to be a father who loves his son, not just a ruler producing an heir. And if that costs me standing with the Confederation, so be it." They sat in silence, watching the alien stars. Tom thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways he could fail these people who'd put their faith in him. But he also thought about Prince Kale's smile when Tom walked in humming. About Talira's voice getting rougher as she learned to sing with emotion instead of perfection. About all those Valdorian parents discovering they could connect with their children in ways they'd never imagined. Maybe that was worth fighting for. Even if it scared him. Even if he wasn't sure he deserved this responsibility. "Okay," Tom said quietly. "I'll stay. But if this goes bad." "It won't," Vacheron said with certainty Tom wished he felt. But all Tom could think about was Ambassador Crethon's parting words. "There will be consequences." 3 months after the council meeting, Prince Kale took his first steps. Tom happened to be there, sitting on the garden grass humming, "You Are My Sunshine," while the 6-month-old practiced standing. Valdorian babies developed faster than human ones, but Kale was ahead even by their standards. The little prince wobbled, grabbed onto a bench and suddenly let go. He took one shaky step toward Tom, then another, then 3 more before falling into Tom's arms. Tom caught him laughing. "Did you just walk? You little show-off." Kale giggled, an actual laugh that sounded almost human, and immediately tried to do it again. Empress Talira came running when Lyra told her what happened. She watched Kale stumble toward Tom again, this time making it 5 steps before falling. Her eyes got wet, which Tom had learned meant she was fighting back tears. "He did it," she whispered. "He's really doing it." The developmental assessments that Ambassador Crethon had demanded showed interesting results. Prince Kale scored slightly lower than average in standard intelligence benchmarks. But he scored off the charts in social bonding, emotional regulation, and what Dr. Shinera called adaptive curiosity, the ability to explore new situations without excessive fear. Dr. Vexith presented these findings to the council with obvious disappointment. As predicted, the prince's cognitive development is suboptimal. He's in the 47th percentile for his age group. And his emotional health? Dr. Shinera challenged. Vexith waved dismissively. Unmeasurable by objective standards. Then let me give you something measurable. Children raised with traditional protocols show stress hormone levels 40% higher than those raised with Tom's methods. They have twice as many behavioral problems. And their parent-child attachment scores are significantly lower. She pulled up comparison data. 2 groups of Valdorian infants, same age, similar backgrounds. One group raised with strict scientific protocols. The other with Tom's emotional approach. The differences weren't subtle. The traditional group hit developmental milestones slightly faster. But they also cried more, slept worse, and showed signs of anxiety even at 6 months old. The children raised with Tom's methods seemed happier, more secure, more willing to take risks like trying to walk or reaching for new objects. But their intelligence scores, Vexith started, are slightly lower at 6 months, Shinera interrupted. But studies from other species show that early emotional security correlates with better problem-solving and creativity later in life. We may be trading short-term cognitive gains for long-term emotional intelligence. The debate raged for weeks. Scientific journals published competing papers. News outlets across multiple worlds covered the Valdorian childcare controversy. Some species sided with the Confederation, calling Tom's methods primitive regression. Others started experimenting with similar approaches for their own children. Tom tried to ignore all of it. He focused on what mattered, helping Kale and teaching parents who wanted to learn. The rest was noise. But the noise got louder when Earth got involved. Apparently, news of a human janitor influencing an alien empire's childcare practices had reached home. The media went crazy. Tom started getting messages from reporters, talk shows, even the UN asking for interviews. He declined everything. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to do his job. Then his neighbor from Ohio sent him a video message. She was holding Mr. Whiskers, his orange cat, who looked fat and extremely spoiled. Tom, I don't know if you've seen the news, but you're kind of a big deal now. Everyone's talking about you. Your old boss from the construction company gave an interview saying he always knew you were special. She laughed. Which is funny because I remember you saying he never learned your name. She held the cat closer to the camera. Anyway, Mr. Whiskers misses you. I miss you too. But it sounds like you're doing something important up there. Your grandma would be proud. Tom watched that video 5 times. He hadn't realized how homesick he was until he saw that familiar apartment, that fat cat, heard that Midwestern accent that sounded like home. Emperor Vashran found him in his room, staring at the paused video. You want to go back, the Emperor said. It wasn't a question. Part of me does, Tom admitted. I miss simple things. Coffee that actually tastes like coffee. Football games. Knowing what all the street signs mean. But I can't leave yet. Your son still needs me. And there are still parents asking for help. Tom sighed. I don't know. Maybe I'm fooling myself thinking I'm making a difference. Vashran sat down heavily. Let me tell you what you've done. You've taught my wife how to sing to our son. You've taught me that being a good father matters more than being a perfect emperor. You've shown thousands of parents that connection matters more than optimization. He paused. That's not fooling yourself. That's changing a culture. I never meant to change anything. I just hummed some songs. The best changes often start that way. Small, simple, real. A week later, Ambassador Creathon returned for a follow-up council meeting. He brought more data, more arguments about why the Confederation still considered Tom's influence problematic. But something was different this time. 3 other species sent representatives who disagreed with Creathon. They tried emotional-based childcare methods and seen positive results. Not dramatic, nothing that would show up in short-term studies. But parents reported feeling closer to their children. Kids seemed more resilient, more willing to explore. These are subjective feelings, Creathon argued. Not objective data. Feelings are data, countered a representative from the Minari species. Just because we can't measure them with current instruments doesn't mean they're not real. My people have embraced these methods. Our children are thriving. The vote this time was decisive. Tom could stay. The program could continue. The Confederation could take their objections and file them wherever they filed things they were upset about. After the meeting, Tom walked through the palace gardens with Prince Kale toddling beside him, holding his finger for balance. The little prince was talking now, baby babble mixed with actual Valdorian words and weirdly a few English phrases he'd picked up from Tom. Up, Kale said, raising his arms. Tom picked him up, settling the kid on his hip. You're getting heavy, buddy. Song, Kale demanded. Which one? Twinkle. So Tom hummed Twinkle Twinkle Little Star while they walked. Kale rested his head on Tom's shoulder, content and safe. Lyra found them by the fountain. Tom, there's someone here to see you. From Earth. Tom's heart jumped. Had something happened? Was his neighbor okay? The cat? But when he got to the visitors area, it wasn't his neighbor. It was a woman in her 30s wearing a UN diplomatic uniform. She smiled when she saw him. Mr. Morrison? I'm Helen Chin from the UN Cultural Exchange Program. We've been following your work here. I'm not doing anything special, Tom said automatically. The galaxy disagrees. Which is why we're here to make an offer. She pulled up a holographic document. We want to establish a formal cultural exchange program. Humans teaching emotional wellness and childcare practices to interested species. We'd like you to head it up. Tom stared at her. You want me to what? Train other humans in your methods. Send them to worlds that are requesting help. Create a network of... No, Tom said firmly. Absolutely not. Helen blinked. Mr. Morrison, this is a significant opportunity. It would establish humanity as a valuable contributor to galactic culture. The funding alone. I don't care about funding or opportunities or establishing humanity as anything. Tom adjusted Kale on his hip. This isn't about making humans look good. It's about helping kids. The second it becomes about politics or prestige, it stops working. But surely you see the value in spreading these methods. Yeah, I do. But not through some official program run by people who've never hummed a lullaby in their lives. Tom softened his tone. Look, if other humans want to share what they know about childcare, great. But don't make it official. Don't turn it into a cultural export. Just let people help people. Helen looked frustrated but nodded. I'll relay your feelings to the committee. After she left, Empress Talira approached with an amused expression. You just turned down significant political influence for Earth. Good. They don't need it. Tom looked at Kale, who was falling asleep on his shoulder. This little guy doesn't care about Earth's political standing. He just wants to feel safe and loved. That's all any kid wants. That night Tom made a decision. He'd stay on Valdoria another year, long enough to make sure Kale was fully bonded with his parents, long enough to train a solid group of locals who could continue the work. Then he'd go home. Not because he didn't love it here, but because home was important too. Mr. Whiskers needed him. His neighbor was getting older. And honestly, Tom missed fall in Ohio with an ache that surprised him. But he'd leave behind something real. Not a program or a political movement. Just parents who knew how to sing to their kids with genuine feeling. Teachers who understood that connection mattered more than perfection. A whole generation of Valdorian children growing up knowing that emotions weren't weakness, they were strength. 12 months later, Tom stood in the palace courtyard with a single bag of belongings. Prince Kale, now 18 months old and talking in full sentences, clung to his leg. Don't go, the little prince said, tears streaming down his purple face. Tom knelt down to his level. Hey buddy. Remember what we talked about. You have to go home. That's right. I have to check on my cat and see my friends. Tom wiped Kale's tears. But you know who's going to be here every single day? Mama and Papa. Exactly. And they're really good at singing now, aren't they? Kale nodded reluctantly. Empress Talira and Emperor Vashran stood nearby. Talira's eyes were wet. She didn't hide her tears anymore. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. Take care of him, Tom said. And don't forget, it's okay to mess up the words sometimes. The feeling is what matters. The transport ship left at sunset. Tom watched Valdoria shrink in the viewport, that beautiful alien world where he'd accidentally changed history just by remembering his grandmother's songs. His communicator buzzed. A message from Lyra. Kale asked his mom to sing Twinkle Twinkle tonight. She did it perfectly, off-key and full of love. He fell asleep in 3 minutes. Thank you for teaching us how to be human. Tom smiled. That was the thing, he hadn't taught them to be human. He taught them to be themselves, imperfect and emotional and real. Back on Earth, Mr. Whiskers was waiting. So was his neighbor, his apartment, and a life that had seemed too small before but now felt exactly right. Tom Morrison, former janitor who'd hummed his way into galactic history, went home. And in the quiet moments before sleep, he still hummed those old lullabies, knowing they were echoing across the stars in 1,000 different voices, keeping 1,000 children safe. His grandmother would have liked that.